Hi, welcome to the Times of Israel's daily briefing. It's Monday, March 3rd, and I'm Jessica Steinberg. I'm speaking today with Zman Yisrael founding editor Biranit Goren. Hi, Biranit.
Hi, Jessica.
It is day 514 of the war. This morning, a 70-year-old man was killed in a Haifa terror attack, with three others seriously injured and one moderately wounded. The terrorist, an Israeli citizen, was killed on the scene. Meanwhile, in the country's center, thousands gathered this morning to pay their respects to slain hostage Itzik Elgarat. They accompanied his body and held flags as the coffin was driven from the country's center to burial in Kibbutz Nir Oz, where Itzik Elgarat lived and from where he was taken captive on October 7th. We'll also talk about a meeting this morning between recently released hostage Eli Sharabi and Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu before Sharabi joins other recently released hostages on a trip to Washington, D.C., where they plan to push for the second phase of the hostage deal. We'll talk about all of that and some other subjects in just a moment. All right, so Bira, let's start with the Haifa terror attack, which really details are just coming out now. What are you hearing and what are you thinking?
Well, what we know is that, as you said, a 70-year-old man was killed, four are injured, anywhere between seriously to critically. It happened at the central bus station in Haifa, which is really one of the busiest transportation hubs in Israel, public transportation hubs in Israel. From what we know, it was just one terrorist. He stabbed his victims until he was neutralized. He was killed on the scene. His identity has already been reported. He's a 20-year-old Israeli citizen from Shfar'am. Now, that is quite concerning. We are always very, very worried about Arab Israelis getting into terror. It's not as people think it's not a common thing. And so when it happens, it always worries that it may be a start of a trend or whatever. And also we have to remember that on Thursday we had a terrorist attack in Karkul, also in a bus station in Karkul, where an illegal Palestinian staying in Israel illegally ran over several citizens. And the week before that, we were very lucky in that detonation devices were found early on several buses in Bat Yam. So they seem to be going back to the pattern of targeting public transportation as we were used to in the second intifada some 20 years ago. So that is a very worrying trend.
Right. I guess we'll see what unfolds from that. Let's move on to hostage issues. Eli Sharabi, the recently released hostage who came back skeletal and gaunt and revealed many details about what happened to him in captivity on the Uvda program on Thursday, and also came back to the horrifying realization and news that his wife and two daughters had been killed on October 7th in their home in Kibbutz Be'eri. And he spoke with the prime minister this morning, and he is heading to the U.S. to meet with President Trump. What do you take from the phone conversation? What do you take from the fact that he had the phone conversation ahead of this trip to the U.S. or as he's heading to the U.S.?
Well, I think we need to split this into two. I mean, from Eli Sharabi's point of view, I think we've unraveled a hero to a point that he's become almost a sensation in Israel. I mean, his interview was probably the most raw, the most revealing, and the most tantalizing interview we've seen with any of the released hostages. He really held no bars in not just describing what he went through, but also in his personality. You know, the way that he portrayed himself in that interview made people just completely fall for him. So I think the fact that he's going to meet with Trump, it's not just Trump paying him homage. Eli he comes through as a person who does things. He's a leader. And I think he's stepping into this not just to give his voice, not just to join the campaign to free the hostages. He's actually working at it. He looks at this meeting and going to Trump and talking to Prime Minister Netanyahu this morning as part of his job. And it came out very clear from his conversation with Netanyahu. He told him, you work on your part. You work on your side on government. I'll work on Trump. I'll take it upon myself to convince the American government, the American administration of what needs to be done. So it was almost like, it felt like a responsible adult just walked into the room who knows what he's talking about, who has every reason and he has the ability to do this job, to step in and to make sure that this deal moves forward. On Netanyahu's point of view, it was quite interesting in the sense that it almost felt like I think he understood who he was talking to in the sense of how responsible he is, but I think it almost like Sharabi surprised him. I think Netanyahu was just talking, the video of them talking is interesting because you see Netanyahu is just giving his usual pitch about, I'm so sorry and you are so brave and I really appreciate it. And, maybe we'll meet one day. And I did try to call you 10 days ago, but it didn't happen, as if to tell the Israeli audience, don't think I'm heartless. You see, I am talking to him. But then Sharabi, on his part, when he started talking, he was like, tachlis. He was like, forget about all of this. Let's talk about what are we doing and how do we work together. He literally said this. How do we work together to get this done? Forget about all the other bravadas and all about, honoring me and being sorry for me. Forget that. We're at work now. So that was I thought it was quite refreshing and quite interesting. And I hope that Netanyahu takes him up on it, because I think he has a person there who doesn't care about politics, who's not into, he thanked Netanyahu for all he is doing. So I think this is an opportunity for Netanyahu to take somebody who's a doer, who has the ability to do things, who has the motivation to do it and the knowledge of what to do. And make him a partner or an ally in getting the hostages back home.
Right. It's all it's all feels very surprising in a sense, because we've seen the pictures and the images of these hostages for so many months, but you don't actually know them, of course. You have no idea who they are and who they are after this horrific experience that they've had.
Oh, Jessica, you are so correct. It hit me in Shiri Bibas and Kfir Bibas and Ariel Bibas's funeral.
Yeah.
That, Yarden Bibas chose American metal rock.
Well, heavy metal and rock.
Yeah. And I thought, wow, I really don't know him. It would never have occurred to me. I don't know what their taste in music is. And here's this side of a person that I really don't know. And I felt the same about Eli Sharabi, because prior to the interview, all I knew of him was that he has the most horrific tragedy. He's a modern Job. I mean, even Job didn't go through what he went through, and you're thinking, wow, he's probably sad. He's probably curled
broken
up somewhere. He's probably,
right.
Exactly. You have all this image in your head, and then you see this vibrant, strong man in front of you with a work plan, with a raison d'etre, and it's exactly what you said. I told myself, we don't know them. And the one last thing I want to say with regards to this is how impressive they are. It's almost as if the captivity didn't break them, it built them.
Exactly.
They come out so inspiring and so strong and very, very impressive. Very.
Agreed. And I just want to note that Eli Sharabi is not the only one going in this delegation of freed hostages. He's joined by Doron Steinbrecher, who was one of the first released in the first release of the deal. Keith Siegel and his wife Aviva Siegel, who of course was freed in November 2023. Keith Siegel is American. has lived in Israel for many decades. Naama Levi, one of the 5 surveillance soldiers. Omer Shem Tov, just released. And Yair Horn, also just released, whose brother Eitan is still a hostage. So there's this whole delegation of, so to speak, freshly released hostages. And your words resonate, Bira, because they literally just get out of captivity. Here they go. We'll hear what they have to say as well as the days go on, I assume. Okay, let's take a quick break. When we're back, we'll talk about the win of No Other Land in the Oscars last night for Best Documentary. So stay with us. Okay, so Bira, I know that you stayed up to watch the Oscars last night, and there was this win of No Other Land, the story of Palestinian activists fighting to protect their communities from demolition by the Israeli military, won the Oscar for Best Documentary. It's a film that's made by an Israeli and a Palestinian. There's been a lot written about it. We've had a lot written about it on our pages. What were your thoughts as you were watching it coming up? Had you given any thought to the possibility of it winning before you were watching the Oscars?
Oh, they were the sure favorites to win. There was no, I mean, I'm not saying this from my perspective. I mean, it was very obvious. They won so many awards over the last year, and at every analysis that I read over, especially in the American press before the Oscar award ceremony, they were the shoo-ins to win that category. So it was almost to a point where we were watching to see if there would be an upset. It was expected that they would win. I have to tell you something that's an interesting angle. Zman Israel is the only, the sister Hebrew website of the Times of Israel that I edit, is the only website in the world to have had both Basal Adra and Yuval Avraham feature in multiple articles that we wrote about Masaf Ariata, the area where Adra lives and the movie is about, before the movie was made. In fact, we were there when they met and started talking about, they haven't even filmed yet. They started talking about making a film together. So we have this in our archives from 5 or 6 years ago. So it was almost like to a point, a personal thing to watch. Look, to be honest, the Oscars was a really, really a long and tiring ceremony. The No Other Land win was right in the middle. I was waiting for that so I could go to sleep.
Right.
But then after that, I couldn't go to sleep because the reactions in Israel to their speeches, which was to be expected. I mean, Basal Adra spoke about ethnic cleansing. Yuval Avraham, who is the Israeli among them too, spoke about the world having to stop Israel from what it's doing in Gaza. And I knew that in Israel they will see Yuval as a traitor, and then and people will denigrate him for things he said and all this. And of course, our culture minister Miki Zohar, who I promise you has never seen the movie, doesn't know anything about the movie, called it an Israeli movie. It is not an Israeli movie. It wasn't funded by Israel. The fact that Yuval Avraham is Israeli doesn't make it an Israeli movie. So he was already talking about how we need to relook and about allocations and the support for movies in Israel. And it's a sad day for the Israeli cinema. No, it's not. This is the 3rd time in history of the Academy Awards that an Israeli wins an Oscar. And putting everything aside, that is a feat to celebrate. Israel, for whatever reason, has yet to break the barrier that other countries like Iran, Slovenia yesterday have already broken, of becoming a cinematic powerhouse. In part because the culture ministers, not just Zohar, but others before him, think that for whatever reason, cinema should be propaganda and not just provide ample support for Israeli filmmakers to make films. And you could see that very clearly in yesterday's or in this last night's ceremony. At the end of the day, the movies that win from overseas, if not American movies, from overseas, they don't necessarily deal with politics. They don't necessarily deal with the Iranian movie that won best animation is an incredible flow. I really recommend watching it. It's an incredible movie. This is not the first Iranian movie to win an Oscar. Israel should be there as well. It should. It has great storytellers. It has great stories. It should be there as well. And it won't be if the government doesn't start looking at arts as something that needs to be free, that needs to be supported and elevated.
Hey, Bear, I have a question for you. Given the fact, I mean, no other land, as you said, really has just swept the awards in all these other film festivals and events. So, as you said, it was a shoo-in. It was pretty obvious that it was going to win. And just to point this out to our listeners, it's a film actually about the South Hebron Hills. It's not about Gaza. It's about a village, about a Palestinian village. Was there a sense for you as you watched the ceremony, which I did not watch, I've watched some clips of it this morning, that given where we are 16 months after October 7th, given the image of Israel in the world right now, that this was also a little bit of a push from the Academy to say, this is the film that we're going to give Best Documentary to?
No, this was probably one of the least political ceremonies I've seen. I mean, you got to know the people that were attending the ceremony yesterday. They have Trump on their head. They have, it's been a month and a half since Trump took office for second term. So I'm not saying this for good or bad. It is turmoiling. There's a turmoil in the United States around this, and so they have Trump. They have the wildfires in LA that a lot of the people that were sitting in that ceremony in the audience, they've lost their homes, or they know somebody who lost their homes, or whatever it is. So they have this. This wasn't a political ceremony at all. Were used in the Academy Awards and in other, Golden Globe, etc., to see people either mention or provide some kind of viewpoint on worldly affairs. I think there were even more mentions of Israel and Hamas in the last year's, a year ago, in the Academy Awards. This year, it was almost like a sore thumb or a sore spot to have the people from no other land bring up politics. It was just so
out of
not.
it. Right.
Yeah, there was really no other political. There was the only political, if you will, it's not even political reference, was Daryl Hannah. She was giving out one of the awards, and she went on stage and said "Salve Ukraina," and that was it, and everybody applauded. So it was really so apolitical that in a way no other land and the speeches that Bassel Adra and Yuval Avraham gave was almost out of place.
Got it. Interesting. Well, thank you, Bira, for being with us on today's Daily Briefing. It's been good to hear what you have to say.
Thank you, Jessica. It's my pleasure.
And thanks to all of you for listening to the Times of Israel's Daily Briefing. Stay tuned for tomorrow's installment. This episode was produced by the Podwaves. Any comments you have, you can always email us at podcast@timesofisrael.com. Until next time, take care and be well.